Last time we talked, we were talking about Zohar Nekeva and Mashpia Makabel. In order for Achdus, for oneness to happen, how did two people, two realities, how did they become one? How is that possible? So maybe if you say it's two parts of the same neshama, and marriage means that the neshama is reunited and they become one. Okay, neshamas can become one. But v'hayu l'basar echad, basar echad, you're talking about two people, human beings. How is there an achdus? How can two... So in order for that to happen, the Torah has to explain. That's why the Torah tells us that in the beginning, the Eibishter created Adam, male and female. That is such a weird thing for us to try to imagine that you have to wonder, why does Torah need to tell us that altogether? It's like saying that, we used to be apes and we evolved and we are what we are. Now we're normal. Why do you have to bring up this weird, not normal condition? Because we have the impression that the Eibishter created Adam, Zohar and Nekeva, and that's crazy. So he fixed it by separating them. Then we became normal. It's fakir. The normal condition is that bara eisei, Zohar and Nekeva, bara eisei. A person has to be both. The separation was not natural. To be only male or only female, that's not natural. And that's why they weren't created that way. That's why, right after separating Adam and Chava, the Eibishter says, Al Kain, Yazev Ishas Ozer Vesime, V'davak B'ishte V'hayu L'basar Echad. You can wonder, they were Basar Echad. You separate them and then tell them to become Basar Echad. And what is Al Kain? Al Kain means this is why you can become a Basar Echad. Because your real nature is to be Echad. So now, if the separation is artificial, something separated Adam and Chava, and they should not be separate, so how do they become Basar Echad again? What can they do to become Basar Echad? The answer is, you don't have to do anything. Remove this artificial thing that is separating the man from the woman. If you remove the separation, then by nature you're one. So it's what you don't do that brings the achdus, not what you do. It's what you're not what you are. So in order for that to happen, the man has to become one with his wife in a masculine way, and the woman has to do it in a feminine way. When you have a mashpia and a makabel, and they're both doing what they're supposed to do, then they can become one. If you have two mashpiyim, no matter what they do, can't become one. If you have two makabelim, they can't become one. Only when you have a mashpia makabel. So, what does it mean that a makabel becomes one, and what does it mean when a mashpia becomes one? So we already described. Mashpia means giving. Giving means in response to a need. With fi hakeli, that's called pnimis, that's called olam hatikun. Whereas in olam hatayu, the mashpia is mashpia, and the keli is not makabel, or it can't be makabel, so there's shviras hakeli, and you have tayu. In olam hatikun, the keli is makabel because the mashpia is mashpia kefi hakeli. But in order to become one, the mashpia has to give so much, so completely, give himself so completely that he basically becomes bottle in the giving. A gitzichavet. The woman, on the other hand, becomes one if she is makabel 100%, which means she accepts him into her existence, into her being 100%, which means that she dissolves, she becomes bottle in the Kabbalah. So when you have a mashpia who becomes bottle in hashpah and a makabel being bottle in Kabbalah, then there's a complete removal of all things that separate them. The result is they're back to being one again, which is natural. So that's why there are all sorts of halachas about how to be intimate. How to have sex, you have no halachas. You have no instructions, and no instructions are necessary. Every shmendik, every idiot, every lowlife knows how to do it. But intimacy, this is a chachma. This is an art. And for this, Torah has to tell us. So what are the laws? The laws are basically remove all things that can come between you. Get past anything that can come between you. So there's only ish v'isha, no thing, and the result is the hayil b'asarecha. But there's a condition to that. And that is that your kavanah should be like in Gittin. It has to be l'shma l'shma. It can't be a generic text. In intimacy, it has to be l'shma l'shma. They have to be focused on each other and dissolve into that. So the Torah tells us the lights have to be off, because if you see something, then you have seen something, and everything gets in the way. Eyes can only see things. Eyes don't see people. You see things about the person. You don't see the person. Intimacy means connecting to the person, not to anything about the person. So people say, no, but when I see her, I get even more excited. Yeah, but not about her. You're excited about what you see. And you're not allowed to be thinking about somebody else. And you're not allowed to be angry at each other. And you're not allowed to be planning a divorce. And you're not allowed to be intimate where there's no lock on the door because you're thinking maybe there's a distraction. Any distraction is a thing, and that thing can come between you. In fact, even the pleasure of the relationship can become a thing. If that's your thing, then you're not capable of intimacy. If love is your thing, then you're not having intimacy. Intimacy means no thing, nothing. But practically speaking, how do you turn? Well, let's start from the beginning. Halachically, anything a husband and wife want to do, you're allowed to do. So you have permission, you have halachic sanction, husband and wife can do whatever they want to do. And that's very realistic, it's very practical, because husband and wife are going to do whatever they want to do. So, fine. Everything is kosher, everything is allowed. However, we're not animals. We're bali nefesh. A bal nefesh wants his relationship to be up to something with a little edelkeit or a little holiness. Particularly if you take children seriously, you want to have good children, you want to have edelit children. That's what you're supposed to be thinking under the chuppah, that the children should be good children. So if that's negeya to you, if that's important to you, then you're not content with everything's kosher, do whatever you want. So the quality of the relationship between a husband and wife, it might be lifnim mishuras hadin, if you want to call it that. It might be a bit of an avodah beyond what is legal or kosher, so that when a college teacher or a chassan teacher says, yeah, I'm a meg, yeah, and that's also. I was talking once to the college teachers, and one of the teachers asked the question, what's wrong with, I forget what the issue was. What's wrong with the girl, with the wife being on top? What's wrong with... I said, I don't like how you're asking this question. For two reasons. First of all, when a person says, what's wrong with carrying a key on Shabbos? Just a key. You really want to know what's wrong? Then ask a question. When you say, what's wrong with that? That's not a question. You listen to the tone of it. What's wrong with doing that means I've already decided there's nothing wrong. I've already decided I'm doing it. If you can change my mind, convince me otherwise, but I've made up my mind. That's not asking a question. Number two, why is it enough? Why is it acceptable to do something because you can't think of what's wrong with it? Oh, there's nothing terribly wrong with it? Then I'm doing it. Why have you lowered your standards like that? Why are you looking for minimum? If it's not a big aveda, I'm doing it. Why? So instead of asking, what's wrong with this, ask what's right. Particularly when a kala is coming to a kala class to learn with a kala teacher, they're idealistic. They're starting a new life. They want to do it right. They want to get off on the right foot. And they don't want a heter, and they don't need anybody to give them heterim. They know how to do things without asking. So if they're coming, they want to learn, what's haste you tell them the minimum requirement because you don't think they're interested? What kind of teacher is this? So they say, come on, be realistic. What's the matter? What world are you living in? You know what's going on among... If you know what's going on, then you really need to raise the standards. So because you know that there's a problem, that's why you're lowering the standards? If you think that there's something terribly wrong with a lack of edelkeit, you're helping by lowering the standards of edelkeit? So what is edelkeit and what is kedusha? What is mekadesh atzmei b'shas tashmish? That's mekadesh, right? You say Mishnah is about that. This one woman came to Crown Heights from Beis Chana, and Baruch Hashem, she got engaged, she got married. And I call her, I ask her, how's everything? She says, it's good, things are good. I just can't stand the gargle. Why are you laughing? I said, what? The gargle bothers you? It's part of the set. You wear a kapot and you put a gargle. She says, no. He wears a gargle to bed. I think that's a something that can come between you. So how do you mekadesh atzmei? Wearing a kippah with a gargle. So I don't know. There are people who are really holy. They say to think about the Rebbe. I don't know. I don't know what thinking about the Rebbe Mekadesh Atzmei means Edelkeit. Not like a Chayra. Not indulging yourself. So how do you do that? One practical suggestion: to elevate your relationship to something a little higher, a little more noble, a little more dignified, a little more able. At the very least, introduce to your relationship that once you're in bed, there's no talking. Well, it says that you shouldn't talk. But I'm saying not only mitzad halacha, but mitzad breaking out of the old habits and introducing something a little more. The mother actually says that it's very unhealthy for the children if you talk. But again, besides all of that, just as a starting point of bringing in a higher ingredient, if you're not already doing that, it makes a huge difference. You'll feel a great difference if you know that once you're getting serious, there's no talking. Why? Because there's nothing to say that has any meaning, that has any value when you're doing something much higher and much greater than words. So if you do that, then you become conscious of the fact that you're doing something special. That's called Mekadesh Atzmi. If you don't realize that you're doing something special, then there's no Kedusha. So it doesn't mean Chazer Mishnayis Balpeh or wear a gartel. It means bring in a little bit of Edelkeit, which is appropriate to the event. It is a holy, awesome thing. Treat it that way. Don't degrade it. Don't cheapen it. Do it the way it is meant to be done. So just as a practical, the other thing is, you have to treat your wife with a certain amount of kedusha in all areas of life. You don't just become Kodesh in the bedroom all of a sudden. So if you've been talking down to your wife, if you're critical of her, if you mock her, if you insult her when company is in the house, and you put her down and you make her feel terrible, and then you're going to walk into the bedroom and you're going to become Kodesh, it's not going to happen. So you have to practice a certain degree of dignity, a certain degree of derech eretz in every room of the house. So you never raise your voice. You never talk down. You never make demands. Remember, this guy was sitting and talking in a group, and his wife came over and wanted to say something to him, and he said, Go stand in the corner. Be quiet. Go stand in the corner. Make coffee. A couple of weeks later, they called me. They want to have marriage counseling. I said, I don't need to talk to you to tell you what's wrong. He had no idea. He had no idea that he was doing anything to ruin the Shalom Bayis. So the tone of voice that you use with your wife has to be different than the tone you use with anybody else. And we know what the right tone is. You talk to your children with a certain tone. You talk to your mother with a certain tone. It's like if you're listening to a telephone conversation and you're hearing only one side of the conversation, you know who they're talking to from the tone. You know if they're talking to an employee or to an employer because it's a different tone. You know if you're talking to a customer or if you're talking to a partner. The tone has to be correct. What is the proper tone between a husband and wife? You got to watch it. if you raise your voice, I don't mean necessarily angry, but if you have to shout at each other, it's already degrading. So if you call your wife from the other side of the house and you have to raise your voice, it's not acceptable. I can tell you personally, there were many years when we were growing up that we didn't know my mother's name. You know her name? Because my father never called her. When he wanted to talk to her, he would go to the room where she wasn't talking. Never called her. You don't summon your wife. So a little dignity, a little Edelkeit in your tone of voice, knowing that when you go into the bedroom, you're going into a place that is set aside, that's called Kedusha. That's called holy. I remember this couple renovated their house, and they were very proud of the new look. So they're giving us a tour of the house. You come to the bedroom, they say, and here, take a look what. Walk into somebody's bedroom? That was so foreign. It was so uncomfortable. No, there's nobody there. They want to show off the new. That's not acceptable. So in these practical ways, we get to actually live up to the ideal. The ideal is two people losing themselves, not taking pleasure from each other, losing themselves in something bigger than both of them. And the result is, when you lose yourself, then there's an empty space. Because you're not filling that space. Your ego is not filling that space. When a husband and wife both lose themselves in the intimacy, you create this mokum ponui that invites the child, it invites the baby into the world. When parents are busy with themselves, they fill all the space. Then the baby that is born doesn't feel welcome, doesn't feel invited, doesn't know if there's any room. It has to get a word in edgewise because they're busy. So the Rebbe once said, Ish v'isha shchina beinehem. The Rebbe said, what's beinehem? Aleihem, imohem. What's beinehem? I think at that time, in that sikha, the Rebbe said, beinehem is the space between the beds. If there's a beinehem, if there's a space, then there can be a shchina. You don't leave any room, then the shchina can. So the same is true with babies. If you don't leave room for the baby, then there's no room beinehem for a third neshama. So the child doesn't feel really welcomed or wanted or invited. And you see children that from the first moment, from when they're born, they're already upset and resistant to the parents. Whatever the parent says is no, I don't care. How does this friction start so young? If we left space for the baby, if we had real intimacy, the baby would feel much more welcome and much more part of the relationship. And that might be what the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, that in the beginning, that there's Chochmah and Bina, that's Av v'Ein, and they are moiled to this, Bonim. But then there also has to be Das. If there's no Das, then there will be a Tulda. Chochmah and Bina will produce an emotion, but it's not going to be a real emotion. It's going to be a dimion. A shallow emotion, a temporary emotion. It's not going to be the real thing. So what is the das? The das means the connection, the attachment. If the husband and wife are focused, attached to each other, identified with each other, then what they give birth to is strong and healthy, and not necessarily a baby. Even when there's no baby, what they produce in their intimacy that is real is the achdus. It's a real bond. The Gemara says that the mashpia, the husband, who makes a woman feel like a keli, makes her into a keli, she will never be able to leave him. The bond becomes so strong that you can't break it. So when we look now at what the secular world says about men and women, it is so untrue. It is so misleading. It's such misinformation. It has nothing to do with men and women, what they're saying. Sex has nothing to do with men and women. You don't need a man and a woman to have sex. And then they're shocked. Oh, two men want to get married. Why not? You have to have a man and a woman to have sex. But you do have to have a man and a woman to have intimacy. So the attraction of a man to a woman is not sexual. That's a lie. That's like the big lie that everybody accepts as the ultimate truth. Like the lie of anti-Semitism. It's not true that men and women are attracted to each other sexually. The real attraction of a man to a woman is the desire to become whole and to become one. And to do this, there's only one way, and that is the way the Torah says. The result is that any time a man and a woman engage in sex, no matter how much they enjoy it, no matter how much they agree and they're on the same page, and it's mutual and it's consenting and so on and so forth, the end result is any man and woman who have been sexual with each other have lost respect for each other. There are no exceptions. Sex diminishes people. It diminishes your respect for yourself, and it certainly diminishes the respect for the person you've had sex with. And that's why when a marriage goes bad, part of the disgust that the husband and wife have for each other when they're getting divorced is that they've had sex with each other. They actually hold it against each other. Yeah, you're so low, you're so disgusting, you're such a chazer. Why? Oh, you had sex. Yeah, it takes two to do that. But that's the nature of sex. It reduces and diminishes people. Because a human being has no business being sexual. A human being should be intimate. Intimacy has the exact opposite effect. Not only doesn't it diminish you, but it actually enhances your respect for each other and makes you feel more innocent than before. And that makes perfect sense. If you were able to get beyond all things, where you don't want anything, and you dissolve into the achdus, into the intimacy, then you're going back to being Adam and Chava before the Eitz Hadas. The Basar Echad, which was the original state, that was the most innocent state. So you actually are tapping into something so innocent in you that it makes up It's more powerful than all the uninnocent parts of you. So you feel more innocent after being intimate than before. I guess that's the ultimate test. If you want to know, did you succeed in being intimate and getting beyond all things, what are you left with? What is the outcome? If you feel more innocent than you've been intimate, if you feel a little so the bottom line is that being intimate is a very noble and very wise and very able achievement. Even with the best intentions, even the best couples, not every time that they are together do they achieve real intimacy. And that shouldn't be discouraging. There will be many times when the husband and wife are together and it's just two people doing their own thing. It's not a sin, and it's not a shock. But if that's the goal, then the relationship doesn't have a chance. If the goal is to achieve intimacy, even if it's a few times a year, but if that's your goal, then the whole relationship, the whole marriage, the whole family, the whole atmosphere in the home takes on a kedusha and an edelkeit that makes everything worthwhile. So, number one, you don't necessarily start off on that level. Everybody has their own yetzer hara, everybody has their own temperament and their own. So the Torah has to tell you that whatever a husband and wife do together is kosher. But kosher is not good enough. So you want to grow and you want to become more able and you want your relationship to go upwards, not downwards. So you start. You introduce a little more edelkeit, a little more tznius, a little more respect, a little more thought. And if a few times a year you can achieve real intimacy, then you know what marriage really is. And then you know how bonded, how inseparable a man and a woman can become. Even if everything else, they have differences of opinion, differences in taste and in tam v'reach. But if they've been intimate, everything else will work itself out. And one final thought. In the Beis HaMikdash, the Kodesh HaKadoshim, there was a serious problem because if something needed to be fixed in the walls of the Kodesh HaKadoshim, who would do it? Not every Kohen Gadol was a mason. And even the Kohen Gadol was not allowed to go in unless it's Yom Kippur. So how did they fix the Beis HaMikdash? So Shlomo HaMelech built a room on top of the Kodesh HaKadoshim. That room held a box, like an elevator car, which was closed on 5 sides and open on the side that faced the wall. Wherever the wall needed to be fixed, the worker would climb in on top over the Kodesh HaKadoshim, would get into that box, and they would lower him along the wall that needed fixing. So he was completely sealed off from the room, from the Avid of the Kodesh HaKadoshim. He did his work, and then they pulled him back up, and that's how it was done. The amazing thing is that space, that attic, whatever it was called, that space above the Kodesh HaKadoshim, the Medrash says that space was called Cheder HaMitos. And it's a Medrash clear. There were no beds there, ever. So why was it called Cheder HaMitos? The message in it is that your marriage is Kodesh HaKadoshim. Eishes Ish is Kodesh Kadoshim. And if something is wrong, something needs fixing, how do you fix it? You fix it from the top. And the top is Cheder HaMitis. If in the bedroom there's a real intimacy, if in the bedroom things are healthy and things are good, then it can fix any problem that develops in the Kodesh HaKadoshim. If, on the other hand, there's problems in the bedroom, then it must affect everything else that goes on in the house. It affects the whole relationship. It turns what's supposed to be beauty into ugliness. And you notice that when a husband and wife are not getting along well, they are much nastier to each other than they would be with anybody else. Because if it doesn't work, if it's not the best, then it becomes the worst. So the expression, familiarity breeds contempt. Contempt is a very strong word. And which familiarity are we talking about? I know there's a problem that if you're from the Maskilas, if you go in and out of the Rebbe's room, you can't really be a chassid. You're getting too familiar. That's not what breeds contempt, chas v'sholom. Where does familiarity breed contempt? In the bedroom. So as nice and as good as familiarity is everywhere else in the relationship, you should become so familiar with each other that you don't even have to talk anymore. Because you know what each other thinks. You can finish each other's sentence. You know exactly what mood you're going to be in, what mood she's going to be in, what food she's going to want to eat, what she likes, what she doesn't like. You're so familiar with each other, it's beautiful. But not in the bedroom. If you start to become familiar in the bedroom, everything falls apart. That's like the Kohen Gadol becoming familiar in the Kodesh HaKadoshim. You die. You have to drag you out with a rope. In Kodesh HaKadoshim, there's a great pleasure as long as you remember that this is not your place. This is Kodesh HaKadoshim. Once you start thinking, yeah, but I'm the Kohen Gadol, so I go into the Kodesh HaKadoshim, no problem. Then you die. you don't survive that visit. And that's why children who are taught about how to make babies, and they know all the facts of life, and they can explain it to you with diagrams, with dolls, with tzatskes, with baises. So you say to them, you're such a smart kid. I see you really understand the facts of life. So I guess that's what your parents do. The kid will say, oh no. Oh, no. No, my parents don't do that. Excuse me, but you just told me how babies are made, and you're your parents' baby. No. What are they saying? They're saying, of course that's how babies are made. So that's what parents do? No. You don't do that. That's like saying the Kohen Gadol, he goes into the Beis HaMikdash. No. You don't go into the Kodesh HaKadoshim. But on Yom Kippur you went. Yes. So you go there. No, you don't go there. If I start thinking like that, I'm going to die. The same is true with intimacy. Intimacy is an awesome experience. So that's what you do? No. That's what you don't do. That's why it's such an awesome experience. Once you start thinking, yeah, that's what we do, then it's sex. Then it's not intimacy anymore. And that can kill a good relationship. So, any questions so far?
Yeah, can you take this from the seventh heaven and bring it down to earth?
No talking. Lights off. That down to earth?
That piece I think was somewhat down to earthish. So what are you doing? There's no talking, but you're in the same bed. Your kavanah, you shouldn't wear the gartel around your waist, but you should have it around your brain. How exactly are you? Say it again.
No, I said that's a very good way to put it. The gartel around your brain.
Oh. But it's almost as if, starting as a bar mitzvah bacher, you need to start learning about this thing called Kedesh HaKadoshim that you're building towards. And now that when you're married, you're there. If you're not sitting and studying all day and becoming an edel person and prepping for this, the concept of maybe you'll be there once or a couple times a year, great. But what's a practical step to approach intimacy in a way that you're not feeling like you're second guessing your every step and questioning if, it's kosher, it's appropriate?
I hope people don't get so paralyzed by these ideas that they're actually awkward. It's true that we really should start learning these things when we're 13. And it's very sad that we haven't. And maybe the next generation will have the benefits of getting a head start. So we got to be realistic about the fact that we have to learn as we go. But if we can accomplish two things. Number one, whatever your relationship is, and for however long it's been going on, it's possible and it's a good idea to elevate it to something a little higher. And I think most people feel this. Certainly anybody who's in on this call obviously wants something better, wants something a little more appropriate for human beings, a little more appropriate for Yidden, and certainly more appropriate for Chassidim. So the first thing is always be ready to ratchet up, to go up, to be upgraded to the next level. The Mittler Rebbe, they say that the Mittler Rebbe, what he wanted most from his Chassidim is that they should always be ready to be inspired to go up. To say the same thing about the tznius and the edelkeit of our relationships. So it's not that we need to be crippled with guilt or with questions or with doubts. We are what we are until we become better. But that we should always...
Here's a practical question that came in.
Yeah.
How does one not talk during intimacy when perhaps the wife needs to tell you either to do something or not do something or vice versa?
I think halachically, anything that pertains to the intimacy, you're allowed to talk. You're allowed to say. But nothing that is irrelevant or not directly related to the intimacy.
Okay, so general schmoozing, not guidance for what's working, what's not working. That fits in perfectly.
Yeah. So as much as it's necessary to have conversation before, because that's really a good way of getting into the mood and relaxing and focusing on each other and putting things aside. So as much as important as it is to talk before, that's how important it is that once you're in bed and once you're starting to be intimate, there should be no further talking. That's just a practical halachic thing. But a person should always be ready to go up. We shouldn't be looking for ways to become less edel. We should always be looking for ways to become more edel. And when our head gets edel, when the gargle around the brain is good, then everything else follows naturally, because the head is where it's all determined. Most intimacy happens in the brain. The rest is just commentary. So if the head is on... Huh?
another question that came in. What does it mean when we say don't become too familiar in the bedroom? What is it that you shouldn't know? What is it that we're staying away from in that setting?
Yeah, it's not something you shouldn't know. Familiarity means I know, but I'm not careless with it. I'm not getting sloppy about it. You can't not know. And it's not good to not know. In fact, it's good to know. But familiar means that you're starting to feel like this is yours, like you have some rights, like this is your place, when in fact it's not your place, and you can't own it, and you have no rights to it. It's an experience that the Eibishter gives us and allows us to experience, but it doesn't become yours. You can't become sloppy. You can't start running around in your underwear in front of each other. That's sloppy. That's losing your dignity. That's lowering your standards. And it's giving yourself license as if this is your right. It's like when you're in shul, you know how you're supposed to behave. This is when you stand up, this is when you sit down, this is when you bow, this is when you spit. You know exactly what you do in a shul. Because it's not your place, so you do things right. Then you come home and say, okay, now I'm in my element. Now I do what I want. That's not kosher. Not like you're working for the Eibishter, you're on duty until you get home. Once you get home, you're off duty. You can do whatever you want. Not like that. The opposite. When you go into the bedroom, then you have to be at your best behavior. You have to be at your highest, at your most noble, not at your least noble. So acting silly, being ridiculous, doing things you would never do or say in front of other people, why are you degrading your wife? Why do you treat her with less respect than you treat a stranger? So familiarity means, now I'm in my element. Now I can do what I want. That's not intimacy. It's certainly not holy, and it's not dignified. It's just sloppy. It's teenage thinking. Teenagers think, I'm going to get married, and in my marriage we can do whatever we want. No, you can't. Ridiculous. And that's why you have to be more tzniusdik with each other than you are with strangers. So if you must run around naked, do it in the streets. Who cares? They'll think you're crazy, but you're not married to them. But in your home, where you need to be intimate, where you need to have a relationship forever and ever, binyan adayat, how can you afford to damage that? How can you have less there than you have outside? So the whole mentality that when you get married, then you're free to be an animal, that doesn't sound right. It doesn't feel right, and it's not true. It's not true to nature. That does not allow for a relationship to survive. It doesn't allow a relationship to thrive, and it's not an environment in which to raise children.
Apparently, based on the flow of questions, you sparked some interest here. Let me try and get through a couple more of these. What if you're holding by a higher level, at least according to your estimation, but your spouse is not there yet, and she's looking for something else in the bedroom? How do you compromise?
Depends what it is, depends who it is. That's a very individual, very generally speaking. When it says, Isha Ksheda Eser Etzein Baila, it has two meanings. if you're a good wife, in other words, successful intimacy, if you're a good wife, then you do one of two things, or both. You do whatever your husband wants. And that's edel. Whatever, if you're doing it because he wants, that's your edelkeit. At the same time, Oser, saying Baila means you determine what your husband is going to want. In other words, you raise your husband's standards that he should want better things. I guess one leads to the other. If you're there for each other and you want to do for each other, then you're more open to suggestion. You're more open to improvement than if you refuse and fight over it. So just very, very generally, I'm not making any specific Hatadim. You do what works, and then you grow from there to something better.
And if somebody wants specific guidance on a more individual case, who does one turn to for that type of information?
Your local Orthodox rabbi. I'm kidding. It's the last person you want to go to. No, you have to go to a mashpia. You have to go to somebody that you look up to, who seems to have gotten his own life under control, and you get advice.
Okay, let's move along here. Can you give us some more examples about this very interesting idea of not becoming familiar in the bedroom?
You know, if a husband and wife who have been married 40 years, 50 years, 60 years, and they're still a little bit shy with each other in terms of tznius, in terms of dressing, in terms of, if they're still a little bit like conscious of their privacy, of each other's privacy, that is an amazing, beautiful thing. That's the way a relationship is supposed to be. But you can see in couples, the way they talk to each other, they've lost that. There's nothing respectful or sensitive between them anymore. It's whatever. The way they talk, their body language, they've lost it. They've lost it. Their relationship has lost its shine. It's just too familiar. But that can be regained. It's an amazing thing. I talk to people about this who have no idea, nothing. They're coming into Yiddishkeit for the first time or so. In therapy, when a couple have lost their interest in each other, it's an amazing thing that the therapists who charge $200 an hour give great advice to a couple who come in and say, we're bored with each other, we're not, it's not. The advice that the professionals give, almost all professionals, the first thing is, don't touch each other for 2 weeks. And all of a sudden they're starting to heal. All of a sudden they're getting better. So you can think, that's because people are so contrary. Oh, betar nicht? Okay, will ich jetzt. Ich mag, will ich nicht. No, there's something more than that. If I'm allowed to touch you anytime, whenever, we sleep in the same bed, I turn over, I bump into you, I have a nightmare, I wake you up, you wake me up, that doesn't feel like intimacy. It doesn't feel like something sacred. It doesn't feel like something special. And the result is, I'm not interested anymore. When the therapist says, it's really important that you not touch each other for 2 weeks, like all of a sudden it's like, oh, you mean this is like sacred? This is like special? Can't touch? Oh, that feels like intimacy. This I want. So it's amazing how quickly intimacy comes back as soon as you start treating it like that. But this comedian says, how come every movie, in order to be successful, has to have sex in it? So he asks people, why is it? They say, because a movie wants to appear real, wants to be true to life, and people have sex. So you have to show sex. He says, yeah, but people also have soup. So why, if you want to be real, why don't you, every movie should show at least one meal made out of soup, because people eat soup. So the answer, very simple, is if you show soup, nobody's going to come. Nobody's going to pay to see soup. Why? Because soup is familiar. You have soup. You want to eat it, eat it. You want to like it, don't eat it. You enjoyed it, fine. You don't want it, spill it out, sell it, do whatever you want. It's yours. It belongs to you. You're familiar with it. It tastes good, so you enjoy it. Intimacy is not familiar. It's something you don't do. Like every child says. My parents? No. The Kohen Gadol doesn't go into the Kodesh HaKadoshim. He was there. That's not where he goes. This is something you don't do. That people will pay to see. But now, it's become soup. Now even that people aren't going to pay for anymore. Because it's so familiar, it's so plain, it's so ordinary, who cares? But even after it's become soup, as soon as you start to treat it with a little bit of kedusha, even a little bit, it comes right back because it's real. It's real. You treat it like intimacy, it is intimacy. Even after neglecting it for years. So, anybody who's done tshuva can testify that this is true. It doesn't matter how you've behaved before the intimacy. Once you treat it like intimacy, it is intimacy. And it has all the power and all the edelkeit and all the kedusha that intimacy is supposed to have. Because one has nothing to do with the other. It's a different world.
Rabbi, we're at the top of the hour, and I want to ask you us with something practical. To bring the program to a close, what's something, a actual step that we can try working on to help us actualize what we're talking about here?
Well, let's first agree that this whole thing is not practical. There's nothing practical about any of this. It's like an insane thing that people do. So it's either insanely good or it's insanely dumb and low. The practical thing is this. Every halacha, every minhag, every harchaka has a reason and is essential. Everything you add to your relationship makes a huge difference. So even if you're not doing everything, take it all seriously and intend to grow and to increase and to include more and more into your relationship until it becomes the real thing. Because that's the goal. That's how we create healthy families, healthy children, and healthy people. So if you have this attitude that all of these minhagim and all of these halachas and harchakas, they're all good for people who want to be frum, next thing you know, you're going to be wearing a gartel and a kittel. No, it's not like that. Not like that. They're really practical, necessary ingredients in making a true intimate relationship. None of it is unnecessary. None of it is frum. It's all emes. It's there for a reason, and it works. If we have that attitude, we're on a good path, and good things will happen.
Excellent. Excellent.